Hello, strangers. But it's funny, because you look kind of familiar. And this is story number 65.
I grew up in a small town in Florida. On a map, my area would technically be considered Barden, or it would, except the town borders are informal ever since some drunk tourist hit the welcome to appalachia sign, and no one ever thought to put it back up. But growing up in the swampy marsh of my state means I've heard all manner of stories and legends having to do with the wetlands and the things that live in them. Gators abound in the area, which are usually blamed for anyone's missing cat. Occasionally, someone will get super drunk and insist that Appalachia, famed for being one of the 2 water scene filming locations for Creature from the Black Lagoon, has some kind of curse on it for its part in bringing the Gillman to life. And this explains why so many babies born in the area have webbed feet. I don't know about that. I mean, not the webbed feet thing. I've seen plenty of kids in sandals, and I don't recall a lot of webbing. The thing is, there's 100% something that stalks the marsh where I live. It has nothing to do with any movie, and to this day, I keep myself away from the woods at dusk, because what I saw bothers me, even this many years later. My town has a couple of big festivals every year. These festivals bring in the tourists like crazy, and ours and the neighboring towns catch the overflow of families on vacation in our assortment of hotels and motels. It's good for the local economy, I get that now, but back when this story took place, me and my little gang of friends, Alex, Greg, and Dougie, we all saw the tourists as encroaching on our turf with their exotic cars, weird accents, and snooty attitudes. We lived there. We are well aware we didn't have a Starbucks. We certainly didn't need some smug out-of-towners to jeer at us about it either, or complain that no, the entire state was not, in fact, a theme park for their family to attend. We stayed clear of them as much as possible, and grumbled amongst ourselves for the trouble. So when the boys and I were approached by a stray tourist kid in one of the shops, you can understand why we were wary. Lincoln was average in appearance, but once he opened his mouth to ask what there was to do in this weird town, well, I looked at my friends and they looked at me, mentally agreeing then and there that we were going to take that little comment personally. I know Greg for sure did, as the store in which we stood belonged to his parents. Lincoln went on to conspiratorially brag that his mom was big in film, and their visit to the festival was doubling as a covert scouting event. Alex asked if it had something to do with the Dark Universe revival of monster movies. Gillman was in fact a local, after all, so this wasn't much of a surprise or secret to us. Man, Lincoln got real uppity real quick at that, both confirming it to us and shutting us down for daring to ask. Greg and I exchanged another look, and that was that. It was time for the time-honored tradition of small-towners like us messing with outsiders. We told him we were going frogging that night, and if he really wanted to see something cool, we could bring him along. I jumped into protest, of course, really laying it on thick that this wasn't the kind of thing we'd show to outsiders. Hook, line, sinker. That's the thing about people who want to play the I've got a secret game. They thrive on being the one to leave you out, and it galls them to be on the receiving end of the same trick. Lincoln's eyes went wide as he insisted he got to come, that he'd be cool, he wouldn't tell anyone. Took everything in me to keep a straight face. Alex and Dougie caught on. Alex took the role of advocate, pushing that we should be good ambassadors to our town. Dougie took the role of fierce opposition, using the fear of Lincoln's safety, pointing out that he wasn't from here. He didn't know what to do or what to stay away from in the swamps. Which one of us was ponying up to tell his parents if he got sucked down and lost forever? But Lincoln swore he'd follow our instructions to the letter, his eyes shining with desperation to not be left out. We made a show of huddling up to debate his invitation, but of course, Alex and Greg won. Lincoln was told to meet us at the edge of the main road that very night. He was told to bring a flashlight and some old clothes. It was muddy as hell out there, and boots too, because slides could get sucked right off your feet. Lincoln was aglow, fawning over Greg's advice while shooting Dougie and me some triumphant looks. We played this up too, acting like we were really bothered and bummed. Once we decamped and headed back to Alex's, we broke into laughter. He wants to see Gilman for another movie. Ugh, we'll show him Gilman. The idea was pretty simple. We'd take Lincoln into the woods, show him a thing or two about frogging, and maybe catch us some ourselves. Might as well not waste the trip. We'd give him some advice about where the big bullies like to hide. All legit. But then, we'd start to spread out. Separate a bit. Doing it slowly enough that Lincoln wouldn't notice a couple of us disappearing. Alex's dad had done some scuba and skin diving in his youth and had a ton of equipment, which included these black, webbed gloves. Further, Dougie had built an anatomically correct Gilman mask for a school project, positing that the creature would have looked more like a salamander, known as the axolotl, and less like a melted Jabba the Hutt. We'd have one of us, probably Alex as the tallest, put these on with a ghillie suit. Then either Dougie or I would call attention to Lincoln that we'd lost sight of Greg and Alex. Start shouting for him. Direct Lincoln to go around to where Alex would be hiding. Out would pop Alex to give him a good scare. Who knows? Maybe give him some notes to take back to Hollywood or whatever to make the new swamp movie cooler. But most importantly, Lincoln would learn to be a little more gracious of a guest in someone else's town. Well, everything went off without a hitch at first. Lincoln was there at the appointed time. He wore jeans so new and stiff he walked like a robot. We assumed this was the kind of kid who didn't own slop clothes in which to help Dad work on the car or something. We double-checked that these were indeed clothes he could get mud on and be okay. Lincoln confirmed this, but Dougie still went scrambling back to his house to get an old pair of waders for him anyway. We wanted to scare some manners into him, not fetch him a beating from his parents for messing up what looked like a brand new pair of Timbs. Then we set off, joking and cackling, ceasing at the swampy woods so as not to scare off the frogs. We demonstrated catching one, stuffing it into a covered basket my grandpa always called a creel. We called it the frog basket. Then we fanned out, at which point Alex began to slip further and further from the pack. He hastily donned the costume, then hid out in some overhanging dead trees, waiting to strike. We sent Lincoln over that way. We were pretending to be hunting our own frogs, but secretly, we all kept an eye on him for the reaction. And boy, what a reaction. Alex popped out in all of his glory, making a gurgling sound and waving his arms. Lincoln screamed so hard his voice cracked. He fell backward into a clump of reeds. Alex came closer, hands out like Frankenstein. But the gurgling sounds gave way to laughter. He just couldn't keep himself from cracking up. Off came the head, and once his sandy blonde hair, all messed and fluffed up from being in the mask, came into view, Lincoln's shrieks turned into relieved laughter too. Alex helped him up, and cheered by Lincoln's reaction, laughing along with the joke and not getting all mad. We all gathered around and joked with him, asking if he'd take notes for the big movie his parents were scouting to film. Lincoln said he would, even said he'd heard a dozen times about how locals would mess with a shoot. I guess Children of the Corn was long rumored to have been a cursed movie. It had had a lot of unexplained phenomenon happen during filming, but it turned out that actually, a bunch of teenage rednecks were messing with them, half from the same sense of intrusion into their hometown that me and my friends felt, and half from the sheer delight of pranking. Lincoln told us that his mom said those rumors of the curse were the best advertising. We immediately began coming up with plans, each more outlandish than the last, on how we could do the same, only better. But while we were standing there, laughing and plotting, Greg reeled back a bit, asking Lincoln if he had dropped a load or something. Lincoln blinked. I don't think he got what he was being accused of, but then we all smelled it. A stink, sure, but not of a fear-induced pantload of pork and beans. This was sour, rotten, a bit like a dog rolled in something dead and got wet but turned up to 11. I felt my stomach roil, suddenly hot and murky deep in my guts. I didn't know what that smell was, but its sudden presence was unsettling. We looked about in the reeds and muck, assuming one of us had kicked or dislodged some dead animal from the muck and brought its odor out to the air, but we found nothing. Then Greg grabbed my arm. When I looked at his face, the nasty feeling in the pit of my stomach pitched again. His eyes were wide, face drawn in the dimming light of dusk. Our flashlights were losing the battle against the coming night. I turned my head to follow Greg's gaze, and I froze. About 30 yards away, a yellow, sickly light emerged from behind a group of cypress trees. It was a lantern, held by a giant man. His posture was hunched, but even bent and slouched, you could tell he was huge, easily taller than 2 of us kids stacked. As I saw him, my eyes watered, like looking at him made the stink worse. In the lantern light, all you could tell of his face was that it was dark, maybe muddy. His eyes were sunken, black holes in his face. My friends, seeing Greg and his reaction, turned to look. Lincoln started to say something like, "Nice joke, but what's that smell?" But Dougie hushed him quick. We were all so stunned that he must have caught on this wasn't a joke. Lincoln's mouth snapped shut. The man took a shambly, lurching step towards us. As he did, the lantern cast a swinging light over his body. It looked like he was wearing, of all things, a long, hooded fur coat. Another step towards us. We were frozen in fear. Another step, and he must have tripped as his head came down fully into the lantern light, the light splashing over his face more fully than before. His face wasn't muddy. His face was hairy, or fringed in fur-thick hair. But it wasn't exactly a human face either. The deep-set eyes glittered black in the light. I thought it might be a mask until I looked at his mouth. From it, yellow teeth chewed what was left of the back end of a frog, its legs limply dangling from his maw. It wasn't a mask, not the way it moved. My stomach lurched, dinner and acid rising up in the back of my throat. It wasn't a man, but I didn't know what it was. Each step he took, the smell got stronger, making my sweaty skin feel oily with its grease. It was coming right at us, and we might have stood there frozen until kingdom come. But of all the people to break us from our fear, it was Lincoln city boy in his stiff blue jeans, who threw the thing he had closest to hand, his own flashlight. He hucked that light at the monster and screamed, "Run!" And run we did. We were stumbling over pockets of marsh and dead logs in the uneven terrain, screaming like hell. We heard it make some odd, growling sounds behind us, but none of us dared turn to see if it was chasing us. We fled. When we broke out of the woods, marshy ground replaced with crabgrass and sidewalk, it was only then that I dared to look behind us. And off in the distance, I thought I saw that yellow light swing between the trees. The smell was gone, the air clear of it, so the light might have been a lightning bug. We all stood, hands on knees trying to catch our breath, nervous laughter and shocked, "Did you see? Did you see the frog?" exclamations amongst us. Lincoln made us swear we weren't behind this second surprise. He seemed to believe us, but it didn't exactly make him delighted that, out in the swamp, we'd encountered something dark, inhuman, and inexplicable. If it's any consolation, I'm not exactly thrilled about it either. Lincoln left the following week, and school started, and that was that. I still meet up with the boys at school and on the weekends. And yeah, we still go frogging. But we avoid that area, and we never go out alone or without the highest power flashlights we have. I still don't know what that thing was. I just know I never want to see or smell it again.
If you haven't been down to see Barden, you should go. I had a good time there, but then again, I tend to keep myself out of the swamps. If you'd like to reach out, email and socials are in the description. Interacting with the like, comment, and subscribe features does something, allegedly. And otherwise, we'll meet again next Tuesday. Stay strange, stay safe, and take care, strangers.